What's up, and thank you so much for tuning in today. In this video, we're going to be going through step by step how to create a table in MySQL. So let's just start with a little bit of background here. What are tables? Well, a table is just a collection of related data in a database, organized into rows and columns. As you can see, we've got a little example table here on the screen. I may or may not have stolen these company names from Marvel. Thank you, Marvel. And this table, like any other table in a relational database, is going to be organized using rows and columns. So the rows run from left to right. They run horizontally. Meanwhile, the columns run from top to bottom. They are going to run vertically. So that's the basic layout and basic structure of how a table works in MySQL. Now, in MySQL, tables can only exist in databases. You can have as many databases as you want in MySQL. All you have to do is tell the computer to create one and it will, and we'll go through that in just a few minutes. But you have to have a database before you can start creating tables. The tables live within the database. Now, before we dive into the actual process of creating a table in MySQL, we first need to talk about data types. So for every column that you create for your table, you're going to have to tell MySQL what type of data goes in that column, and hence we have data types. So here's just a few potential data types, and mark my words, there are dozens, maybe hundreds of different individual types of data that you can put in MySQL. I'll post a link in the description to the manual that explains all this stuff, but here are some common ones. These are, this will get you pretty far. You don't need to know every different type of data that you could put in there. This actually, on a regular basis, when I'm using MySQL, these are pretty much the only things that I really use. So first off, let's talk about varchars. Varchar, which is at the very top, is used to store text strings. And when I say text strings, I mean that you can literally put anything in there. You can put letters, you can put numbers, you can put special characters, etc. You may also notice that at the end of the term varchar, there's a parentheses. And in that parentheses, you're going to need to put a number like 5, 10, 20, 100. What that does is it specifies to MySQL how many characters that column can contain. So if you put varchar parentheses 50, you're telling MySQL that you should expect to accommodate up to 50 characters here. So if you assign 50 spaces to that varchar, and then you try to import a database and your text string contains 200 characters, it's going to give you an error. So that's how varchar works. Next, we can move on to ints. Ints are for whole numbers. So 1, 10, 100, 1,000, etc. You can also have negative numbers with ints. Then we have floats. Floats are simply decimals, like 2.8 or 3.95 or 148.33. I'm just kind of making numbers up off the top of my head. Doubles are very, very similar to floats, except a double can handle a longer decimal. So basically, with a double, it handles decimals, floats handle decimals. Anything that you can do with a float, you can do with a double, but not everything you can do with a double you can do with a float, if that kind of makes sense. So when in doubt, at least in my case, I just choose double whenever I'm making columns that are built to accommodate decimals. Then we have dates. Dates in MySQL are formatted as year, month, day in the following format that you can see there on the screen. And then we also have date times. And date times are just taking that date format and attaching a timestamp to it in terms of hours, minutes, and seconds. So let's return to our example table from earlier. What would these data types be? If we take a look at what we've got here, you can see we've got customer ID, customer name, total sales, and total profit. I think that the following would be pretty decent things to put in there. So we could say customer ID is an int, because it's a whole number. Customer name would be varchar because we want to put letters and special characters in there. And then total sales and total profit probably could both be doubles since they both have decimals. And again, you could also use float for that as well. But just in general, a double is going to be able to handle more stuff than a float will. All right, let's get started with creating our first table in MySQL. Before we create the table, as we just discussed a few minutes ago, the first thing that we need to do is we need to create the database. So how we're going to do that is simply this. We're going to type the word create and it's good practice to put it in all caps. And it's going to light up in blue because this is it's a keyword, and I'm using MySQL Workbench, by the way. So create, and then the word database, and that should also be in all caps as well. And then after that, we just place a single space, and I'm just going to call this database test, and then you put a semicolon at the end. So this is a complete SQL statement. We're telling it we're going to create a database, and we're going to call that database, it's just going to be called test. So I'm just going to highlight this. I'm going to run or execute that statement. We can come down here, and then if we kind of zoom in, you can see, well, indeed, we have successfully created this new database. And if we come over here to our navigator, I've already got some databases over here. We can refresh it, and there's our database called test right there. Okay, so now we've created the database. Next, we're going to move on to creating the actual table itself. How we're going to do this is it's going to be very similar to what we just did. We're just going to say create in all caps, and then the word table. Oops, misspelled it. Create space table. So just like create database, we're telling MySQL, okay, now we're going to create a table. And after we create table, there's a couple ways that we can create this table. The first way, and this is the way that I like to do it, you put the name of your database first, you put a period, so test dot, and then we're going to create the name of our table. And let's just say the name of our table is sales. So create table test.sales. What we're telling MySQL is we're going to create a table named sales, and we're going to put it in the database called test. Alternatively, if you would like, you can eliminate the word test. Now, in order to do that, create table sales, we first have to tell MySQL exactly what database we want to put this in. Because if we try to run this right now, it's going to throw us an error. It's going to say that we haven't defined the database. So the way we can define the database is we can just put in all caps the word use, and then the name of our database, which is test. And then we close that off with a semicolon. So we would run this statement first, and then after we run that statement, we would immediately run this statement, create table, and then we're going to create our sales table. So just for the sake of, I guess, clarity and saving space, I just like to include the name of the database before we write the name of the table. So we're going to create a table called sales, and it's going to go in our test database that we just created. As we're creating the table, the first thing we want to do after we write this initial statement is we're just going to put an open parentheses, and then we're going to hit enter. And at this point in time, we're really just talking about formatting. I mean, you don't necessarily have to hit enter. You can just keep typing on this line, but I like to hit enter, and then I like to tab over because this kind of helps to keep everything more I guess shipshape. I like to keep things as clean as possible whenever I'm writing stuff in SQL. So create table test.sales open parentheses. Now we're going to create our fields or our columns. So the first column, I guess we can just call let's just say company underscore ID. And so one thing that we should note is that whenever we create our field names or our column names, we cannot do spaces. So we can't say company space ID. MySQL's not going to like that. We have to make sure it's all one constant string of characters. So the best way is if you want to make a table that has multiple words in it. So for example, let's just say it wasn't company ID. Let's say it was company location and let's say type. So in this case, we're defining a field that's essentially called company location and type, but we're putting underscores in between each one of the words so that MySQL doesn't freak out on us. So first thing, we're just going to say company ID and then space, and now we have to define what type of data we're putting in there. Well, company ID, at least what I have in mind, is just like a number, like maybe 235 or 18746. So because it will be a whole number, it's totally fine to put this as an integer or an int. We've created our first field, our first column, company underscore ID, and it's going to be an integer. Next, we're going to create some more fields. So we're going to do a comma here, and then we're going to hit enter, and that's going to take us into our next field. Company underscore ID is an integer. Now let's say we're going to put in something called company and I keep misspelling company. I don't know what's wrong with me today. Company underscore name. Company underscore ID is the number that's represented. Basically, that's their company ID number, so it's an integer. Company underscore name is actually going to contain things like letters and maybe numbers, but also maybe special characters as well. Well, in terms of data types, it's probably best to put that as a varchar. So we're just going to say varchar, and now we have to put a parentheses here because we have to specify how many characters we're going to put in this field. Let's say we're going to allow up to 100 characters. So company underscore name is a varchar. We're going to allow up to 100 characters here. Next, let's just say we're going to put in, into the database how much in terms of sales we made towards that company. Let's just say in the past year. We're just going to call it total underscore sales. Now, when you think about a sales figure, well, sales can be, you can have decimals with sales. You can have even number, round numbers, I guess, or whole numbers. But you can also have decimals. I mean, it's totally possible to have a sales figure that has up to 2 decimal places after the dot, because we've got prices like $1.99 or $1.10 or $1.55, things like that. So what we're going to do here is total underscore sales. Sounds a lot like a decimal, and let's just call it a double. So double, total sales double, and that's all we have to say there. And then we put another comma, we hit enter. Now let's say we want to do a field called net sales. Net sales is basically how much we are netting in profit from the sales to each of these companies. So net underscore sales, that's probably also going to be a decimal, so we're just going to call that a double as well. Now, of important note here, once you create the last field in your table, we're not going to put another comma. So, all these other fields here, we're putting a comma after. This one, we don't put a comma after. All we have to do is just close off our parentheses. So this right here is a complete statement, and then we put a semicolon after that last parentheses, highlight the whole thing, and we're going to click run. So now let's see if we did it correctly. If we come down here, you're going to notice in the output field that there's a green check mark, and that means that indeed we have created this table. So right now we've got a table over here, and if I refresh our schemas navigator, we look in test, and then we look in tables, and there it is. We've got sales, and if we expand that, you can see in our columns, we've got company ID, company name, total sales, and net sales. So the table's right there. Now that we've created our table, maybe we want to see what we can do with this table. I'm going to insert a few values into this table, show you how to insert data into tables, and we're going to take a look at what this table actually looks like. All right, let's just start off with just diving right in here. We've got our table, which is test.sales, and we want to put in some data. Let's say that the data that we want to put in is, for example, company ID is 1004. Company name would be PIM Technologies. And then total sales would be 1,200,000, I guess we don't put commas in there, $1,255,396.28. And then net sales would be something like $214,587.54. So these are the fields that or the data that we want to put into this table. We've got the company ID, we've got the name of the company, we've got the total sales, and we've got the net sales. There's a pretty easy way to insert this data into the table, and how we do that is we just say insert space into, and then we're going to call our table, so test.sales, and then we're going to write in capital values, and then we put a parentheses here. And once we put the parentheses in here, basically what we're telling MySQL is we're going to insert into it, and it's literally just like it sounds. This is one of the things I love about SQL, is it's pretty intuitive. It's just like it sounds. We're going to insert into our test.sales table the following values. And so one thing that we should note here, and I don't know where that went. Okay, there we go. That was kind of weird. So one thing that we should note here is that whenever we are inserting values into a table, basically MySQL is going to take each of these things and it's going to just put them into the fields as it sees them. So the first field in test.sales is company underscore ID. So the first chunk of information, it's just going to chuck it into company underscore ID. Then the second piece of information, it's just going to chuck that into company name. The third piece, it's going to put that into total sales. And the fourth piece, it's going to put that into net sales. Before we put these values in there, we need to make sure that they're formatted correctly. So right now, if I tried to insert these values into our table, all it would do is it would try to put all of this stuff into company underscore ID. And that wouldn't work because company underscore ID is an integer, and we've clearly got stuff in here that's not integers. And we've also got just all kinds of stuff. So what we need to do is we need to specify what goes where. And how we do that is just through commas. So you put the company ID first, which is 1004, when we just put a comma in there. Next, for PIM technologies, we need to make sure that since this is a character string, we need to put single quotation marks before and after it. And then we need to do another comma. And then this is okay on its own because this is just a decimal. We're just going to put another comma there. And then this is all right. And then at the last piece of data you're putting in, you don't put another comma in there because that means MySQL is going to start looking for another piece of information. You're just going to close off the parentheses, and then we put our semicolon to indicate that it's the end of the line. So this is the complete statement. This is how we're going to insert this information into our test.sales table, and again, insert into test.sales the following values, and it's just going to put all that stuff in there. So let's highlight the line. Let's give it a run. Let's see if what we did is correct. And if we come down here, the output, sure enough, the values have been inserted correctly. And now in order to view the data that we've got in there, all we have to do is write select and then star, which just means all, and then the word from, and then space test.sales, and then put a semicolon there at the end of that. So select all from test underscore or test.sales, and there it is. We've got our company ID, company name, total sales, net sales, and sure enough, there's our information. If we wanted to put more values into this, we totally could. We could say insert into test.sales values. Let's just say 1,943. We're going to call it Stark Industries. And then let's just say that we're really selling a lot of stuff to Iron Man. So like $10,356,932.23. And then we're profiting about $1,763,294.77. And then we're just going to close that off. And so we're just going to load these values in, and we're going to run the statement. And as you can see, that ran correctly. So now we're just going to return to our select statement, and we're going to run it. And then if we come down here, now we've got Stark Industries in there as well, and we've got the data for Stark Industries sitting in that table. And we can do this as many times as you want. If you're creating a table on your own, you can just keep inserting values into the table. There are some other ways to insert data into tables. You can pull data in from CSV files and text files and so forth, and I actually have another video. I'll include a link to that in the description about how to import a CSV file into MySQL. You're very welcome to go and check that out. But this is basically the basics of how to create a table in MySQL. It's really pretty straightforward, and hopefully I've explained it to you in a way that you can grasp. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and if this video helped you at all, or if you have any kind of comments or questions, feel free to comment. Please like, please share, and please subscribe. It would definitely mean a lot. I'll see you guys next time.